attached to the minutes so that in the future we can get notice of when these backroom sessions are going to be resolved. Now,
well, they're not backroom sessions. They're actually held in the conference room. They're executive sessions.
They're all executive sessions.
Yes.
Now, I want to also address the thing that Tim brought up with regard to Tony's right to speak on matters affecting his business.
Can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to speak about Tony's right, Mr. Pullella's right, to speak about matters that affect his business. The Brigantine ordinance is very clear, and I'm going to read it so that everybody will know what's involved here. This is under ethical standards, and the reason why we have this part, I'm referring to H and I, if you want to look it up in the code book. When you become a council member, you don't give up your rights as an individual. You don't become a second-class citizen. If you have certain business interests, you can assert those interests as long as you don't make a monetary gain that is over and above what you ordinarily would receive from that type of business. So that's why our ordinance says under H, no officer shall be deemed in conflict with these provisions if, by reason of his or her participation in the enactment of an ordinance, resolution, or other matter required to be voted upon, which is subject to executive approval vetoes, no material or monetary gain accrues to him or her. And it goes on to state, to any greater extent than any gain reasonably could be expected to accrue to any other member of such business. In other words, he can speak up on matters that affect his business as long as he's not going to be making more money out of it than any other business similarly situated. And specifically when you get down to J, nothing shall prohibit any officer or employee or member of his or her immediate family from representing himself, herself, or themselves in negotiations or proceedings concerning his, her, or their own interests. I couldn't be any clearer. He has the absolute right to stand up here and speak up on matters that affect his own interests.
Well, obviously, that's why there are attorneys, because the interpretation of that is open to what the individual believes who is reading it. So I appreciate your comments.
Well, may I, before you interrupt, may I finish? The courts actually interpret this, and this is what the courts say about it. And I'm referring to the Zote case, if you're familiar with it. We recognize that board members will on occasion be confronted with conflict situations in which they are more than individuals with a view, in which they are parties entitled to be heard. That's where Tony is, a party entitled to be heard. The court goes on, board membership does not deprive an individual of a right to pursue an application, nor of the right to pursue statutory rights granted to interested parties.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dragon. I appreciate that.
Well, there's also a statute that deals with this, and there's another case. It is so clear that
well, I'm sure the
right.
lawyer, Mr. Dragon, you're very familiar with the process. I'm sure the lawyers will sort it out. All I can tell you is, from my own personal experience, I've had to step down from the planning board because I'm a member of the Catholic Church, because I'm a member of the rowing club. I don't get any financial interest from any of those things. But if, in fact, the lawyers object that there is a conflict, then you step down. So I didn't sit in the audience and then talk as a member of the public or an individual, because that wouldn't be proper. If it's a conflict that was identified and we were going to have litigation over it later, that's what you do.
Well, I agree with half of what you're saying. He cannot vote on it, no question about that. But he can speak up on it. In fact, in the Murtaugh case, the court said, logic suggests that boards should be most interested in hearing from those closest to a proposed development, and should hear from such individuals before those only remotely affected by the proposal. This in turn suggests a strong policy of encouraging those affected most by the development to be heard. Nobody else has as much information about the subject as Tony does, and he has to be heard on it.
Mr. Dragon, we're not going to try this matter before this body. I don't know what you're getting at.
Well, what I'm getting at is, rather than waste more of the taxpayers' money on this, it's very clear that he had the right, has the right, and you're not going to just take this and sweep it under the carpet and wait for a year or so while the lawyers hash it out. It's not necessary.
Well,
And
I
that's
appreciate
my-
your legal advice, but I'll go with my solicitor. Thank you.
And again, I don't want to further the debate. I just what Mr. Brigantine said.
Thanks. Bob?
Bob Gargiulo, 47 Heald Road. I actually came here tonight because I wanted to hear the status of the golf course. As you know,